Welcome to City Services Monthly. I'm your host, Donnie Turlington. This month we have a very special guest and brand new police chief, Wayne Scott. Chief, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You know, it's probably been a whirlwind couple of weeks for you. In the middle of March, you were named Greensboro's 22nd Chief of Police. You've been with our police department for 24 years. This is something that probably in your mind you always kind of hoped that you would see this day. But tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and who you are, and we'll kind of get into why it's been such a whirlwind for you here these first few weeks.
Okay. Well, you mentioned I've been with the department 24 years. I actually started with the police department when I was 21 years old, and I've had a great career. I have had the opportunity to serve in many areas of our department, many of which I'm very proud of. I've been a supervisor in just about every district we have, and I've had assignments varying from our traffic division, doing traffic enforcement. I rode a motorcycle for a little while for the department. I did crash reconstruction. Then my shift about midway through my career changed over to training. I was able to serve in the executive officer spot for our training division and our commanding officer before coming back to patrol as a commander and eventually being promoted to our deputy chief over patrol for a couple of years. And then my latest assignment was the deputy chief over our investigative bureau. So been able to see and do a lot of things for the organization, and been able to touch the city in a lot of ways.
Where along that career path in your mind did your focus start to become on, hey, I think I want to be a chief one day?
You know, we talk about all the different ranks, and I went through every rank. With GPD, you can't actually skip the rank of corporal, and I was a corporal and a sergeant, and a lieutenant, and a captain, and a deputy chief. Really, when you become a lieutenant, you start supervising supervisors, and that's a different world. It's interesting because you begin to focus away from the day-to-day operations, and you begin to look at more global thinking. How do these things impact not only the group of individuals I'm working with, but how do they impact maybe the group next to us? And you know, I think every young lieutenant thinks, well, if I was chief, I'd do it a little differently. So along the way, you have those conversations. You know, I didn't really begin to have aspirations until I made the deputy chief rank, and felt that I had some things to offer that make a difference.
Sure. And I know I won't ask you to go into a lot of specifics, but you had been a candidate for a police chief position in another city in the past, and I have to believe, Chief, that you've probably took what you learned through that experience and applied it to this one, because you and I have had sort of sidebar conversations about just how grueling this experience was to go through the selection process to become Greensboro's chief. It
was, and you know, people have asked me about that very thing, and I didn't necessarily have aspirations that I want to be a chief in another city. I was actually highly encouraged by our current chief at the time, and he told me it'll make you grow, and those were exactly true words. Going through the process forces an individual, I was a deputy chief at the time, to look at things if you're the person in that seat. And that definitely benefited me. As I went through our process, which was nearly twice as long as that other city, it gave me an opportunity to actually think of things from the perspective of the chief's office.
And I know that part of, in having heard from City Manager Jim Westmoreland as he's talked over the last several weeks about the reason why you were selected is really because of your experience and the vision that you brought to the table. So I have to believe too that part of that experience was for you. It was good to be able to express that vision and to get some buy-in and to talk about it. And now here you are in that seat, and it's time to start implementing that vision. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you couldn't be more than correct. You know, part of my vision for the police department is built on my 24 years experience. So when I look back at that opportunity that I looked at in another organization, I think I could have been a chief, but I think I'm a more effective chief here because of that. My vision is really pretty simple. I've been able to hone it down over the last few weeks because I've been asked that question a lot.
Sure.
You know, I see that our police department is much like many police departments throughout this country. The number one issue right now for us is building trust, strengthening trust, not only in the places where we already have good relationships, making them better, but in places where our relationships aren't as strong as they need to be. And I think there are a lot of strategies around that are specific for Greensboro. How do you do that? You know, we're a melting pot society. This is a wonderful city for a lot of reasons, but part of it is the culture, it's the art, it's the schools, the colleges, even the history of activism here. So that gives us such opportunities to reach such a vast community. And I believe that much like other chiefs across the country, I'm looking for ways and means to think outside that box to how to get involved in the community and get the community involved in policing.
Sure. I heard you several times when you were introduced as the police chief, and I think you used the term as well when you gave your speech during your oath of office, that you want to be a bridge builder.
Right.
Talk about what that means.
You know, I've had a lot of people ask that. I didn't realize that that was going to resonate so much, but I'm glad it did. To me, bridge building is a simple metaphor for the fact that when we look at the government in general, particularly police, because we're the very visible arm of government, that at times we reach gaps, and we reach gaps between the community we want to serve. So how do you cross a gap? Well, I believe you cross a gap with a bridge. And you know, I've thought about it even more since I used that term. It does fit, because I made the comment at one point that I think bridges are typically built from both sides. Mm-hmm. And if you have large bridges, that is the way they're built, the way they're engineered. But that is symbolic of both sides of a situation kind of giving in. Let's look at the other person's side. But then likewise, I'll even say, you know, there's all kinds of bridges. There's metal bridges, there's wooden bridges, there's cloth bridges. And I think that we do have bridges as a police department, just about all our communities. But there's an opportunity for us to go back and to strengthen them, to make those bridges more what we need them to be, or to widen them.
Right.
So maybe my next catchphrase will be to widen the bridges we already have. So that kind of thought. But that's the point, is reaching out to our community, having our community be at a very comfortable spot to reach back to us and meet in the middle. That's what it's all about.
As you look back at your career over the last 24 years, you've literally worn just about every hat that you can wear within our department. Are there some things that you can see during your career where you can say, you know, I can use that and apply that in this situation now, or are you kind of facing, are circumstances different now than they used to be?
Yes and no. and I'll say that because one of the things I didn't mention was I had an opportunity early in my career to be part of a program that actually President Clinton had, which was the Cops Ahead grant. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to be one of our first community resource team members here in the city. We still have community resource teams, and that was the first opportunity where we began to look outside that traditional policing model and talked about how do communities interact, how do we make people get involved in their own protection and law enforcement and the understanding. So I definitely draw from that, and I have throughout most of my career. But equally, these are different times for us. When we look at the country as a whole, we look at the national conversation, I think it's new times for all police chiefs. So it is a combination of it, and I'm reaching out to my peers to see what some of them are doing, but we're coming together and collaborating. I think we have some things ahead.
Sure. So there's got to be police chiefs all over the country. You guys have message boards and other ways that you kind of connect and collaborate and say, hey, here's what we're facing. Yes. What are you guys doing in this city?
Yeah, you know, there are several professional organizations that most of chiefs belong to, but a lot of times it's just phone calls. It's conversations up and down the state. I think Mr. Westmoreland even mentioned I had a number of chiefs that were involved in the selection process. Right. They've reached out to me. It's all about sharing those resources and sharing those ideas, because nothing is really unique to us. We have the same issues, problems, and successes that other places do. So as any professional organization, we try to share that information, and it's better for everybody.
Yeah. Well, you certainly have a lot of knowledge, what I like to call inside baseball knowledge of the police department. That's one of the benefits of hiring somebody with your experience and from within the Greensboro Police Department. But talk about the department that you're inheriting and where you see its greatest strengths, and also, you know, I think we'll talk a little bit later in the show about your vision for some things that you want to see changing. But talk about that department that you are now in charge of.
Well, you know, we're the third largest police department in the state of North Carolina. We're in the top 1% of departments in the country for our size. There's about 18,000 police departments in the United States, and the vast majority of them are less than 100 officers. So when you look at the perspective of that, we have some resources, some opportunities. We have technologies that a lot of smaller departments don't have and can't implement. So we're doing a good job in that area. We've always been very cutting edge when it came to technology, and I'm very proud of that. And we've used that technology to drive our crime numbers down to the lowest we've had since the mid-'70s. So we've had successes in that area. But by far, when people ask me the question you did, I will say it's our personnel. Mm-hmm. It is our people. We have an extremely well-educated, very engaged police workforce, and at least 3 weeks into my career as chief, I will tell you, they're excited to be here. They're excited for us going forward. And they want the same things I do. And that's what's great about it. When I talked about the building bridges comment, I had many folks inside the department that said, you're dead on. That's exactly what we want to do. So those are our strengths. You know, we do a good job of day-to-day policing, and you know, there's always room for improvement there, but as we look forward into the next century of what we have to do as a police organization, it is about that trust building and communication, and I believe I have the staff in place to make that happen.
What do you point to if you look at the last couple of years? You know, the crime rate is something that we've, all of us, myself included, have been talking about, of,
Right.
you know, the fact that the crime is as low as it's been since 1976. What do you point to as a indicating factor behind that?
Well, I think it's a complicated question. It requires a complicated answer. But I will tell you some of the things that we believe have helped us get to that point. One of which is the nation as a whole is there. So I'm not going to take credit for something that 100% we weren't 100% responsible for. But when we look at the economics, we look at the crime going into the era where we start seeing the overall decline, we're more connected now. We being the police department and we being citizens. Never before did we have every person has a cell phone. It's that opportunity to pick up the phone and dial 911 and truly have a police response that quick. Every person has a cell phone with a camera, and those cameras help us solve crimes all the time. We have technologies in place like our pretrial release program around property crimes, where we actually have the opportunity for judges to put GPS bracelets on repeat offenders. We see recidivism drop dramatically because of that. Not only does it drive the crime rate down, but it also takes some of those young folks that are committing crimes and helps them redirect their lives. So that's a good byproduct of it. There's a lot of things that play into it. I think we deploy ourselves in a better way than we once did, and we're mobile. Now, in turn, and this may be going to the second part of your question, some of those things that helped us drive the crime rate down has created us some separation from our communities.
Yeah.
So we've got to come back with that balance.
Sure.
But it's a lot of things that drive it. I think that, you know, some of it has to just do with economics in general in our country, and gas is at an all-time low. So you know what? Gas larcenies are down.
Right.
So we have those kind of things.
Well, Chief, thank you so much. I'm enjoying the conversation so far. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll learn more about enhancement groups and what that means, and talk more about your vision for the department.
Excellent.
We'll take a short break and be back with more with Chief Wayne Scott. Welcome back to City Services Monthly. I'm Donnie Turlington, joined by Greensboro Police Chief Wayne Scott. Chief, we talked a little bit at the beginning of the show of your vision for the department, but I want you to kind of dive deep into it this time. Okay. And I know there's several kind of points to, you know, that I've heard you talk about for several weeks now. So talk about your vision.
Well, we talked about, you know, the overall vision is about increasing trust. So how do we do that? That's the question I get asked by my own employees, I get asked by citizens, and I've got a few strategies that are going to be kind of quickly implemented. And then, of course, we're always looking for better ways. But one of the things that's been out there for quite a while is neighborhood-oriented policing, the NOP plan. Even prior to Chief Miller leaving, we spent about 18 months looking at how do we develop a plan that creates an atmosphere where we can have problem solving by police officers and the proper staffing. Well, I'm moving that plan forward. NOP for me will be actually moving pretty quickly. By the end of this month, by the end of April, we hope to flip the switch on a geographic realignment that we've been sitting on for a while. And traditionally, about every 6 or 7 years, we have to realign our districts. The city grows, business changes in the city. We may have shopping centers that close or open up, so we balance our call load. So that's going to happen at the end of April. That usually takes about 60 days or so for us to adjust through it to make sure we have the right folks in place. And then we're going to move into the phase 2 of NOP. Between now and phase 2, I plan on having some community forums, and I'm going to meet with my employees as well, and I'm going to talk about exactly what they want. What does the citizenry really want to see from their police department? And based off of what we get from the citizens and from our staff ourselves, we are going to create a model by which we can better load the districts with the officers so that we tie that geographic connection between the officer and the property they serve or the areas they serve. And we believe that's important, and that will help us build trust. We all know if we get to know the person who's patrolling our neighborhood, we're going to have a different level of trust with them.
Right.
So that's the goal there. Secondly, some of the things that we're going to be seeing change pretty quickly are going to be the ways and means in which we reach out to our community. I hope to actually institute some crime walks, which are not a bad thing. When I named them initially, people said crime walks. No, it's a walk through a neighborhood to talk about crime, not necessarily because a neighborhood has crime. But I've floated this to some of our folks in the community, and they really like it. They like that idea that we're expanding on something that we do in particular geographic pockets already, and that gives us that opportunity. But those are the immediate things you'll see. Some of the other things around enhancement groups I've created. And what an enhancement group is for me is I think sometimes government gets a little tied into committees, and I don't like committees. So what I've done is taken my senior command staff and broken them into groups of 2 or 3. These are captains. Most of them have 20 plus years on the police department, and I've given them specific tasks to bring these strategies back. Some of the things we're looking at, I've created an enhancement group about contacting our local media to get them more involved. Our elder group will be targeting basically senior citizens or those that have retired and talking to them about how they can prevent being victims of crime, how they can become more active in our police department. We have lots of folks that volunteer that are in that age group, and I can use that. We've talked about enhancement groups around our middle and high school age students, where we traditionally have always said high school and college age is where we look for new police officers or how do we get them involved. We're actually going to back that down to actually middle school because I think we can make a difference in some young folks' lives before they make decisions that will hurt them long term. So there's a lot we can do. Those enhancement groups are on about a 90 to 120 day mission for me, and they're going to come back. And I hope to 3 or 4 months down the road, we actually expand it to other groups. Yeah. So a lot of things happening.
Yeah. As to take you back to your discussion about neighborhood-oriented policing, one of the things that I've heard talked about for a year or so now is how that's going to benefit the residents. You know, it might increase or decrease call times. It might, to your point, it helps to better familiarize the neighborhoods and the people that live in that certain pocket of the community with the people on your end who are serving them. What are you hearing from the community in terms of neighborhood-oriented policing?
Well, like I said, phase 1 is actually physically moving the borders. And we should see, within about a 2-month period, we will see response times go down slightly. That's simply a fact of moving our resources and who would respond to a given call. The second part of it is when we begin to staff it a little differently, and we look at, actually I'm trying to put a few more folks in uniform out on the street. The community has been extremely receptive to that. They like the idea of, number one, obviously a response time is better, but not only better, I think more efficient. Sometimes we had communities that grew and they crossed over different district barriers. One of the things we did is we reconfigured all that is we made sure we kept our communities together. It's important to us not to split a community because it's just as important to you that you have the same officers. Right. So we hope to see some very positive outcomes of that. And then again, the opportunity to get to know those officers, have the same officers come to community functions, it's a win-win. And I've heard that from citizens basically all across the city. They want to get to know us better, and we want to get to know them better.
Sure. One of the themes of your oath of office was change is not necessarily a bad thing, and sometimes it's a necessity and something that we have to go through. And one of the things that I've heard you talk very positively about is some potential changes to the training and to the academy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. I told you early on that I have a very heavy background in training. I served there as a lieutenant and a captain, and I have a good knowledge of our police training. And I will tell you that the Greensboro Police Academy has always been the crown jewel of our organization, and it still is. We do a great job. We have been nationally recognized. We've been recognized on state level several times. But one of the things I think that everyone must understand is you have to look at things to make sure we're doing them as efficiently as possible. And one of the things I've done is create a small committee of individuals, very veteran officers that have had roles in training before, to go in and simply ask some of the questions that we ask everywhere else in the department. Are we training the right length of time? Are we doing the right type of training? And do we have the technology in place in there that we need? One of the things that has been very apparent to me is our average recruit is typically between 22 and 26 years of age. Well, a 22 to 26 years of age individual learns a lot different than a 35 or 40-year-old. Probably more different than we've ever had in any generation in this country.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So one of the things I'd like for them to do, a strategy that I've asked them to look into is there a better way for us to teach some of the classroom material? Secondly, when we look at field training, I believe those differences actually get even wider. We find that we use a traditional style called the police training officer model, and we document behaviors basically in a journal. Well, this group will look and see if there's a way that we can do that more efficiently. Technology has evolved in the last few years where we can have tablets, we can have all these electronic devices. So we're going to see if we can do that more efficiently so that we can spend more time on the street and serving our citizens. And then lastly, I believe that training doesn't end when PTO training is over with. Traditionally, the police department, we had much more veteran officers in the field. When I came through, I had 10, 12, 14-year veterans I worked with. That's not the case anymore. And some of that's just because of the way the department has grown. It's the way that people in law enforcement move around more than they used to. So what I'm going to do is create a mentoring program for our young officers. So they'll have someone that they can go to that's not necessarily a supervisor, because we don't want to make it a judgmental experience. We want to make it a growth.
Yeah.
Someone who can model that behavior. And I envision that will even grow into some more of our two-man car program, which is something we got away with probably 6 or 7 years ago. We did away with all our two-man cars, and they have a lot of value to us. In communities, it's the partner relationship. So hopefully over the next 12 months or so, our community will begin to see that a little bit more, and I believe it'll be good for our training staff.
Sure. Another thing that I've heard you discuss before, and I know it's something that's important and maybe near and dear to your heart, is a Chiefs Faith Advisory Council.
Right.
That sounds like a lot of things, but I would kind of want to hear you talk about it.
Well, the Chiefs Faith Advisory Council, we hope to get that off the ground within about a month or so. And I want to be really clear with you and the audience. It's not about any particular faith. But having been in Greensboro as long as I have, been in the South as long as I have, it has been my experience that most people have some connection to some faith. Now, I'm not discounting those that have no connection, because they're welcome as well. But the truth is that's a community. Every faith is an individual community. And I believe there's a great opportunity for us to bring all these people of faith together, these leaders, whether they be priests or rabbis or pastors or whatever they may be. And we talk about how do we connect from the police department standpoint, how do we connect with the people that are in your community? And I have not found one person who didn't think that's a great connection. And that alone says a lot to me. So our first meeting, we hope to have probably in a month or 6 weeks. We're going to invite basically anybody who wants to come, that wants to be part of it, and then we'll start shaping from there. Now what that gives me is an opportunity to have a line of communication with a part of the community we may not be reaching.
Right. And
they, in turn, have that same line coming back. But there's several things that come to mind that will help us make more diversity in our recruiting. I think they problem solve as well as anybody else. And when we talk about problems in the community, I want to get feedback from that.
Right.
So I'm excited by that coming together, and we hope to be actually seeing some of that. We'll do some press releases in the future about it.
Well, and that answers my next question, because what I've heard you talk about throughout the time that we've been talking is you're going to do a lot of listening. You're going to be out in the community in a lot of different ways, and it's not just your staff, it's you personally that's going to be out and about. What are you hoping to hear? What do you think you're going to hear if I'm a resident watching? What does the chief need to hear from me?
I've already done a lot of listening, and you're exactly right. I've dedicated to my community and to my staff that I'm going to be there and I'm going to lead the way. I'm not going to be alone, but I'm going to be there. And what I'm already hearing is, number one, we want to be heard about a lot of things. But people have individual concerns, and then they have the concerns that are broader. They have the concerns about their community, their children. We're hearing a lot about concerns from adults, parents, grandparents about their kids, and what can we do to keep the kids out of issues? And we go back to that earlier enhancement group I told you about, but it's also about working together, and it's about being visible. I spoke with some elderly folks probably about a week ago, and one of their concerns was they've always respected the police. These people were in their early 70s. They've always respected the police, but now they see that a lot of folks in the community, they don't necessarily have that same level of respect, and even some of them have a fear.
Right.
And that's important to me. You know, we had a great conversation about how do we bring that back around, because we are here to help.
Right.
And, you know, part of my swearing in speech, I also ended by telling you what the purpose hasn't changed. And I sincerely believe that. Most police officers in this country, and I'll say every police officer I know in Greensboro, our purpose is to help our community. And we have to think outside the box to do that now. We have to think outside the box to make that connection. But that's what we're here for. And as long as I'm chief, that's what we're going to do.
Well said. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate your time today, and thanks for all the work that you and your team are doing to keep our community safe.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
That's Greensboro's newest police chief, Wayne Scott. That's all the time we have for this month's edition of City Services Monthly, but thanks for tuning in to Greensboro Television Network, and we'll see you again next month.